Hi, I am Zach,
And I'm Ben.
and welcome to the Movie Vault. Today we are. Why'd you make that face at me?
I like to throw you off.
Yeah, that was the first time face for you. Today we're reviewing the fourth part of our Paul Newman arc, The Sting. I'll get straight to it.
Dun, 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 dun.
Let me start out with a great question, Ben. Is there any more iconic duo?
That is a great question. The duos I can think of off the top of my head: Brad Pitt and George Clooney, Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. Those are the two I can think of. I'm sure there's more.
What about Robert De Niro and Al Pacino?
Oh, that's a great duo.
Now, here's the thing. Would you say in all of the duos, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and Robert Redford and Paul Newman are more alike, or the most alike, because it's an up-and-coming actor kind of paired with an acting legend, kind of progressing his career? Or would you say
No,
that
here's
they're
the
very
thing.
different?
They're very different because, well, no, wait. Okay. Pacino and De Niro, their first time together was Godfather Part 2, right?
It was.
And were they actually in any scenes together?
They were not.
So that's an interesting aspect of that duo, because the next time the duo was together, you know which movie it was?
I mean, not chronologically, no.
It wasn't. So what was Godfather Part 2, like 1973 or 1972?
Probably.
Something around that.
In there.
So they weren't actually in a film together again until 1995. You know what movie that was?
No.
Heat.
Oh, that was really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the rewatchables.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that's the only reason I know that, because they love that movie so much, and they've done like 4 episodes on it.
Okay.
And so I've listened to every single variation of the episodes. So that movie was such a big deal because it was the first time that Pacino and De Niro had been together since The Godfather Part 2. And then the problem with The Godfather Part 2 is that they're not actually together because he plays
the same person.
Yeah, he plays the same person.
Now, also, that film also led to the rewatchables becoming a thing. Even The Ringer in general, right?
No, I think The Ringer was around. The Ringer is like sports. So they
was
were
it
already.
really?
But definitely the rewatchables has helped the popularity of The Ringer.
Is
But
The
it's
Ringer more popular
It's
in
more
sports realm?
about sports, yes.
Really?
Because Bill Simmons is like a big sports journalist.
Okay.
He used to work for like ESPN, and there's a whole. I mean, I don't really pay attention to that side of The Ringer,
Okay.
but that's like all the sports analogies and stuff are because a lot of the people
Okay.
are like also in the sports
Now, Sean
world.
Fennessy also keeps up with the sports.
Yeah, they all do, but I think Sean Fennessy and Chris Ryan more so focus just on films, whereas Bill keeps his foot probably mainly in the sports world and then has the rewatchables.
Yeah, The
as his
Ringer
movie
has
thing.
its own backstory and lore. It's kind of a much bigger thing than, the Cinephiles
or the Movie Vault.
the Unspooled. Yeah, yeah. And again, a lot of the data that I got today was from the Unspooled podcast.
Yeah.
I recommend that one. That's a great one. They have a great episode on the Sting. So the Sting is from 1973. I'm pretty sure it was released on Christmas. I think I remember reading
I read that
somewhere.
too.
It was a really great success.
Mhm.
Awesome film. It competed with The Exorcist in the Oscars, and we'll get into that. There's a lot of drama in the backgrounds of that. It's directed by, once again, George Roy Hill, the man,
Great
the legend.
Linsanity run for George Roy Hill.
Oh, for sure. And he picked up his 2 best leading men, Paul Newman and Robert Redford, and Robert Shaw as well. And
Great performance from Robert Shaw, although accent choice I think is a little odd, but we'll get into that.
Why do you? No, just go. Why?
Well,
just give a synopsis.
I don't know. The Irish accent just I don't know whether I believe it. Is he actually Irish? I would feel bad if he was actually Irish. And
Well,
I'm
I think in
him.
the description it says he's like an Irish American.
Then maybe I just have the wrong idea of what an Irish person should sound like.
I was sold.
Now he's an English actor, so I guess he should be able to pull it off. I don't know. It just was interesting to me that the lead was like this Irish. I guess that's the mob ties probably are part of why they did that.
Yeah, and obviously we're coming right off the back of. I almost called it Billie Eilish for my joke last time again, but it's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And we failed to mention in the last one, please forgive us, that the Sundance Kid really influenced Robert Redford's creation of the Sundance Film Festival.
Which I was like totally blown away. I was like, what?
Yeah, I had heard that before. I did not connect. What is it? What's the phrase I didn't
Connect
put?
the dots.
Connect the dot. I almost said connect two and two. I always put two phrases together.
That's a good thing to do.
I don't know, because then people think I'm saying one thing and it might not be that. But Robert Redford and Paul Newman. Paul Newman is this acting legend. We've seen him in the three films that we've seen for this arc, and Robert Redford in just the previous one that we did. They hit it off in this film. They have some excellent chemistry. I would say that they have a little bit less chemistry than Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, only because they were intended to have less chemistry, because they have a lot of less scenes together. In fact, I don't think that they meet until about a third into the film.
Yeah.
But they still play off of each other really, really well. So we'll get into that later on as well. Would you like to give a kind of brief,
as brief as I can,
synopsis?
So the thing to know about this movie is it's split into 7 parts, and
there are 7.
I think.
I thought I missed 2. Did I? Or you think it's 7 Deadly Sins? Because we were just talking about that before this.
Let me clear this up.
I thought there were 5. I could be wrong.
Yeah, there's 7 acts.
Oh, I missed it.
So it's the players. Some of them are short, I think.
Oh, I missed the players. I didn't.
The
see
players. That's the very first one. Now it's not going to show me. The players, the setup, the hook, the tail, the wire, the shutout, and the sting.
Okay, so I missed the players in the shutout.
So some of them might be a little bit short, and you'd have to go through the actual movie and see, because like the wire and the shutout, I feel like are really in really close congruency to each other.
Yeah.
And like the players and the setup probably happen pretty close to each other.
Well, the last 3 happened within the last 25 minutes, I know.
So let's see if we can try to piece this together based on simply the title. So the players mainly sets up Robert Redford's character, who is...
He's just kind of a grifter.
Hooker, Johnny Hooker. He's a grifter. And then there's Luther Coleman, and they pull this kind of it's a street level con. Mm-hmm. It's a clever con, but it's for they think pretty low stakes.
Well, it's just a friendly neighborhood con, but
so
it's a really clever one.
It is clever because Luther pretends that he has. Let's see if I can even remember. See, these cons are actually very complex, which is why you read on Wikipedia. A movie with a complex plot, The Sting. So he's somebody has stolen his wallet. He ends up like he's like, I needed to, finish this deal. This guy helped me up. I'll give you $100 to finish the job. All of this. Then it gets to a moment where Johnny Hooker, who's like not gonna do the thing, but somehow they convince the other guy to do it. He switches out. It's a bait and switch.
Well, he puts it in his underwear or pants or something.
And he switches it out with another one that looks exactly the same.
Or
he just steals the money and then.
Well, he might have had two. He might have already had an envelope in his pants.
Yeah, very likely. He might have just done the switch out, and then the guy gets on, in the taxi cab thinking he had made an easy. I think it was like $5,000 because the drop off was $5,000. He gave him $100 on top of it to drop it off, but it was no money.
Yeah.
So he lost $5,000. Well, it turns out after all that this guy worked for a big mobster named Doyle Lonigan, who is Irish American mobster, and he does not like people putting hits out on grifting his guys. So somehow Luther they figure out that Luther was involved, and they come and they kill him.
Well, they do that because Hooker he kind of runs away with the money and kind of gets like people to follow him, and then they go and find Luther. So it's Hooker's fault.
Yes. So Hooker feels bad and decides that he needs to enact revenge on Doyle Lonigan, and the only way he can think of doing this is by going out and seeking Henry Gondorf, who's sort of a legend in the grifting community. He's like the biggest grifter of all time, the king of grifters. But he's just drunk and hiding out, running a carousel in front of a brothel. So he's not really doing much of anything in life. Just the FBI's out to get him. They know about him, and he's kind of laying low. So this is where I think the setup comes in, because they're like, okay, if we want to pull the big con, so it's this legendary like. It's presumably every con artist's dreams at night about having the big con. like just a con that you just get so much money, and it's so complex because there's so many levels of deception that you have to go through in order to get whatever person is the victim of the con to believe every step. Because we're all familiar with low-level cons, credit card scams, different things that are designed to like, they should be pretty obvious, but they're designed to like try to catch you at a moment of weakness, or to, get someone who's vulnerable and maybe not in the right state of mind all the time.
Excuse me, sir. The IRS is going to your house right now.
Yeah, they're trying to scare you.
Yeah.
With different tactics into making a bad decision. But this is more than that. This is tempting, enticing you, leading you down a path, and then carefully controlling the path to lead to one moment where they have an opportunity to take a bunch of your money. And this guy has a lot of money, Doyle Lonnegan, so he's the perfect victim for the big con. And there's a reason that they're doing it, because they want to hit him where it hurts after what happened to Luther. So in this way, the screenwriter actually is smart, because you're following, again, Paul Newman and Robert Redford in anti-villain roles, but you've set up a villain who's worse than them so that you start sympathizing. And you've, shown Luther and his family and, the tragedy of it, even though they were all criminals, but you've humanized certain aspects of so in that way, it shows a little bit of reality that people commit crimes, and yet like tragedies still happen and they're still tragedies. But it also is, screenwriter kind of manipulating your emotions to go along with these people.
Well, it's like Despicable Me.
Yeah. Like we're rooting for the villain.
Mm-hmm. That's all I had to say. Sorry.
Well, everything's really kind of like Despicable Me at the end of the day.
I've learned about that. I've learned so much about fatherhood from Despicable Me 4.
So then we go into the next section, which is the hook, where they start enticing Lonnegan, and they are getting him into it's totally completely fake room, setups, crazy, different. It's like the Hall of Fame of criminals and con artists that are coming out of the woodwork to work for this Godorf guy. It's really cool how they have everything set up. They do all these different things. They get him to believe that they have this horse race that's like they can get the results before the race actually happens, even though in reality, there's a guy in the back room who's actually announcing the race, and it's like none of it's real. Mm-hmm. But this was before the internet. You couldn't vet. This is way before the internet. You couldn't vet these things as easily. I'm sure there was a way he could have vetted them, but he's so enticed by the chance at like 100% guarantee of return on your investment. It's not even gambling at this point in his head. And they trick him a couple times, get him to believe these. They set up this whole thing with the Western Union that they can do all this stuff because he wants proof, and all of it's in a con. But there's a third layer to the con, and this is where we get into the Wire and the Shutout sections and the Sting, where the FBI is following Godorf, and this is where I even still get a little bit confused about the movie. So maybe you can help me out a little bit, because there's so many characters in this movie. Sometimes it's hard to follow which characters are in on the con and which ones aren't in the con, especially at the end of the movie. Because Hooker's being followed by an FBI agent. Then there's other people who are trying to shoot at him. Eventually there's like this lady who he's like hitting on that is a hit woman. And so there's one real FBI agent, I think, and they have to trick him into believing that I don't even know, he's not even an FBI agent. He's just a lieutenant in the police department. He's a detective.
I think he might be an FBI agent.
Yeah. It's FBI agent Polk. So he is following Godorf. So they have to also involve him in the con without him knowing. So that's the tricky. And this is the part where the viewer doesn't really know. So if you haven't watched the movie, you're not going to understand it when I explain it. But if you want to watch the movie and you don't want it to be spoiled, then don't listen past this point until you've watched it. But if you don't care, then keep on going. So FBI agent Polk is drawn into this idea that there's a higher level of the FBI that's kind of, we don't want to work through the cops. We want to, a cut of this.
Yeah.
They're kind of threatening him. You have to go along with this. And none of these people are actually in the FBI, which for an FBI agent, he seems to be operating relatively autonomously, like not really reporting to anyone.
He's no Dale Cooper.
Yeah. I guess he's maybe not the brightest bulb in the FBI.
Yeah. Again, he's no Dale Cooper.
It. But it adds another, maybe conveniently, or maybe they always had it planned out this way, another level to the con that ends up paying off at the end of the movie when they plan it out perfectly. The con happens. Johnny Hooker has set it up perfectly. Godorf has been overseeing the whole thing perfectly, and they get Lonergan to give his $500,000 over, and the horse loses. It finishes second, and he's mad. And then at that moment, because you're like, he's gonna get really mad. He could just hijack this whole thing, have his bodyguards come and shoot up the place. Nope, they have an FBI agent coming in. They're blowing up the place. It's a con. So he knows it's a con now. But the last string of the con is that Gondorf shoots Johnny Hooker, and then Gondorf gets shot by the other FBI agent who's above Polk, and then that leads Polk to being like, we got to get out of here, and then the con's up. That we for a second we're like, wait, are they dead? What just happened? Did this just all? And they set it up perfectly in the movie because there's this sort of like foreboding 10 minutes before the end, the payoff of the long con. It's like very foreboding. It's very somber. Hooker almost gets killed. There's all these things that are happening. You're like, this is just gonna blow up in their faces. This isn't gonna work. This movie's gonna be about how you shouldn't be a con artist and it doesn't pay off. Yeah. Well, it actually ends up working. Hooker doesn't even stay around for his cut because he's like, I'm just gonna blow it all on gambling, which we believe because we saw him do that at the start of the movie. So which leads you to believe he's just doing it because he loves being a con artist. He just wants to, the satisfaction of completing this is enough for him. Yeah. And Gondorf is just, I guess, the goat of con artists, so he'll take his cut. And
well, he's had a lot of practice in 3 films before this.
So at any rate, that was a little bit longer of a plot than I give for most movies, but it truly, this movie, for having the tone that it has, I think the first time I kind of sold it short on how complex and truly how much it makes you think. Because, like I said, there's still parts of the movie where I'm like, was I even paying attention close enough to understand what was really going on there? Yeah. Like, if you paid attention super closely to every element, you might be able to see it all coming. But if you kind of let your mind slip at a few points, you might end up being as surprised as the person being conned.
Yeah, and again, watch a YouTube video afterwards. It's one of those kinds of movies. So how would you say his acting compared to previous films?
So the thing that immediately struck...
By he, I mean Paul Newman.
Paul Newman. That stuck out to me is that this was a lot more Robert Redford's movie than it was Paul Newman's movie, which is something I guess I forgot about having not watched it in a while. So having said that, when you're not like, he's the lead in terms of like the posters and everything, but Redford is the lead in terms of screen time. So when that's the case, you have to look at what he did with the time he was on screen. Yeah. And I think compared to a lot of the performances we've seen earlier, and I was thinking about it, it's a great performance because of his nonverbal acting versus his like more charismatic side that we saw in the other films. Yeah. So he presents himself as a character who's very sure of himself, very clever. The poker scene is great. That's like maybe the best scene in the movie that showcases Newman's acting. Yeah. But he's perfect for this role. You completely believe that he's the guy that's looking out the window. Yeah. I mean, that's his role in the movie. Is he's not actually the hands and feet of the operation. He's the mastermind. Yeah. And you completely believe that he can do that. And I almost wondered whether this was a demarcation of Paul Newman being the lead and the young hotshot to Paul Newman being the seasoned veteran. And now I'm going to be in movies where there's somebody who's younger than me who's taking up who's doing like the sexier parts of the movie.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're gonna think about the scenes that I was in because of the impact I had on them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think later on in Paul Newman's career, he kind of steps into more of a supporting role and lets other people shine, particularly Robert Redford in this film and even in the previous film, Butch Cassidy. I mean, if you think about The Hustler and Cool Hand Luke, Paul Newman has, upwards to 90% of the screen time, would you say? But Butch Cassidy in The Sundance Kid, he's really a co-star. He's not really it's not just Paul Newman anymore. And then in this film, you can see it's even more so less Paul Newman. We're getting less and less of him as time goes on because we're going in chronological order in this arc, just to kind of see how his acting evolves over time. And really what I think that means is if you start out as a lead in your acting career and shift into a support role, I think that means you've done it. I think of Robert De Niro, right? Most of his roles now, aside from a very select amount of new roles that he does, are supporting roles. Because he's already had his career of the lead, and once you lead a film and you lead consistently well, like Paul Newman has in all these films that we've seen, and plus many more. I haven't seen many more outside of this arc, and then you can kind of create your own spin on different supporting actors. It really creates a breadth to your acting and kind of expands upon it a little bit. And being able to go back and forth between the lead and supporting actor just shows I can carry a movie on my back and I can support others when they do that. And that shows range, and that's more talent, I'd say, to go back and forth between those.
Yeah. And it really, acting is something like any profession that age is a reality. And there's a certain window that you have that Hollywood gives you, and maybe it's not even Hollywood. Maybe it's just like subconsciously people are like, I want to see movies about 25 to 40 year olds, and that's the main, they talk about target demographics, like 18 to 40 is like the main target demographic for movies and TV. So people want to watch movies about people who are their age. So you can only be that age for so long. And once you pass that, I don't even know how old Paul Newman, he maybe was still kind of within that range at this time. But like I said, it was the start of a transition. Regardless of if you're, Clint Eastwood, De Niro, Clint Eastwood still tries to be the main actor at 80 years old. Yeah. That's great. But most people, you're like, okay, I need to be like the wiser, older side character. And most movies kind of follow that trope. There's definitely ways to break that mold. You don't always have to do that. But if you want to do these like huge commercial success movies, you're going to have to be the Nick Fury and not the Iron Man.
That's what okay, so Samuel L. Jackson was who I was going to bring up. I thought of Morgan Freeman,
Yeah.
Just other older actors. I mean, I know it's dumb, but Steve Buscemi.
Yeah, very true. And the thing is, you can be the best actor in the movie and not be the lead actor. Like I would say, Tim Robbins, I love his performance in Shawshank, but everyone talks about Morgan Freeman. Mm-hmm. Tim Robbins was the main character, probably had more screen time. Mm-hmm. Maybe not by as much as this movie. I don't know. You'd have to go back and look to see whether he actually had, whether it was more of an even split. But people still talk about him more. So just because you're in the lesser role by percentage or by how they present the movie, or, you're not the official lead protagonist, doesn't mean that you won't be the person that everyone remembers.
Yeah.
Now, I do think in The Sting, like, people might remember this as Robert Redford's greatest performance.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't necessarily say that about Paul Newman.
Yeah.
That doesn't detract from Paul Newman's impact on the film.
Yeah.
And it might make you wonder, I would almost argue at this point that unless, something shows me different, Cool Hand Luke is probably Paul Newman's greatest acting performance.
From what I've seen, I still stand by that.
But that doesn't mean that this role wasn't still super important.
Yeah, I don't think this film
career
happens without either of them.
Yeah.
Specifically those specific people.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing to point out is that Nicholson was offered, I think, Redford's role. Jack Nicholson. I don't think this movie is as good. I don't think Nicholson's personality shines in this. He's too sarcastic, too.
Nicholson has his own trope that he kind of follows, and I think in this, Robert Redford had to kind of go against his best instincts in his acting. I think if you look at I keep saying Billie Eilish. Oh my gosh! If you look at his role as Sundance Kid, he's very charismatic and funny, right? He kind of tells jokes. And he's kind of a player and really cool, charismatic guy that makes everyone laugh. In this, he kind of has to subdue that and play.
Yeah, he does.
And he kind of has to show a more layered acting style, because he's not just playing one character. He's playing a character who's trying to play a character, and that's hard, you know?
Yeah.
That's plays layers of acting. And even within the character that he's playing, he has to do it. He's kind of playing even within that in different layers, because he's lying to people who he's lying to. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's a sting within a sting. So I think the Sting can really this film kind of zooms in and shows the depth of their acting, and it kind of maybe detracts a little bit from their stardom and from the reason that they got famous, which is their charisma and their good looks, and kind of gives them a more, although it's still frantic and a fun film, right? With fun music and very much, and we'll get into why it's very much set into the 30s and the Great Depression era, and there's a lot of artistic decisions that George Roy Hill made. But he's placing them he's putting them through the fire, kind of putting them into the hardest challenge that an actor can face, which is like multi-layered acting. And then of course there's method acting, but that hasn't come about yet. But I think they came through the fire stronger. I think Robert Redford especially, he steals this film because this is a new side of him that we've never seen before. And that's why this is his greatest performance, at least, according to the critics. And we'll see in this last film, kind of as Paul Newman really does step to the side for a new up-and-coming actor past Robert Redford, which is Tom Cruise, what his acting style and layers kind of turns into, and how it continues from our book open, The Hustler. So I don't know. Would you agree kind of that their acting really showed some evolution in this film?
Yeah. I think purely like Redford for sure, but Newman just like being willing to step back and not be the only reason the film is going, and to take on a role where he's primarily just like observing and watching, and the few moments, like he has these interactions with Lonigan at the end of the movie that are like super critical. And you like see things, or there's like little like nod and wink moments, but they're so subtle, and it makes you realize that they have so much range and that they're willing to work beyond just what they're willing to not just be comfortable with who they are right now.
Yeah.
But to continue to evolve. I'm reading about the casting too, and there was also a business side of this from Newman's perspective, because he didn't sign on to the film until they agreed to give him top billing. So he still had that kind of weight over Redford.
Okay.
At this point in his career, to be like, yeah, I might only be in 30% of the movie, but I still get top billing.
Yeah.
And to get a percentage of the profits. So this was an actual like business decision for him.
Yeah.
And it mentions that his previous 5 films had been box office disappointments. I guess I don't know how many movies he made, and I could do the research and find out, but I'm going to be lazy and not do that.
In the last 4 years?
He said his last 5 movies had been box office disappointments. I don't know whether there must have been, because I don't think Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was a box office disappointment. Unless it was just a critical success.
No, it was a success.
So presumably there's been at least 5 movies in between the two, and none of them have been that successful. Which it makes sense, because we immediately moved from this movie, from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, to the Sting.
We only do the popular ones.
Yeah.
Those are our tentpoles.
These are going to be like pretty much the most popular Paul Newman movies besides Cars.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't really count as a Paul Newman movie.
But I think it does, because he steps to the side.
That's true.
He's letting the next racer come in, and it fits because he was a race car driver.
That's true. I mean, I'm sure that's part of why he signed on to that project.
But the last thing I'll say about that is, when you kind of step down from that lead role and go into a supporting acting role, it really takes the weight off of you, and it kind of gives you more creative freedom to take more risks kind of with the acting style that you put on the screen. And I think Paul Newman, like you said, like when he was just having those moments with the mob, what's the mob boss, Lanigan?
Yeah, Doyle Lanigan.
Those just become even more important, and the way that he kind of talks to him, and I don't know, just his conversational style is just very serious, and he's playing a character, and you can see just how great of an actor he is. It puts more of an emphasis, I'd say, on those scenes in his serious acting when he's not in that lead role. Because I don't know, that's kind of what I thought. Would you say that Paul Newman, and this is the last thing we'll say on his acting, would you say that his acting, I guess, flourishes in the presence of other actors that are really good at acting, or is he better as a co-star or a lead? I'm not saying a supporting role.
Yeah.
This might be more of a supporting role, and The Color of Money might be more of a supporting role, even more so. But maybe Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, is he a better actor with a co-star rather than Cool Hand Luke or The Hustler?
Well, I already sort of, I guess, gave it away a little bit by saying that I thought Cool Hand Luke was his best acting performance. But I think it is important to think about actors and be like, see how they can do it in both environments. Because I don't think being with a co-star makes him a worse actor. Like, I think he still plays really well off of, and in some ways, you never don't have a in Cool Hand Luke, I forget what the guy's name is, the big guy that sort of bullies him.
Yeah, I forget. The best guy in the film.
Yeah. He was kind of like, I don't think he was supposed to be the co-star, but like his performance kind of like made him that guy that Newman played off of. Yeah. And so I think Newman works really well with having somebody to play off of. In The Hustler, he really doesn't have that person to like spar with. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't even that kind of movie. The Hustler's really, compared to a lot of these movies, the tone is a lot more sad and dark.
Yep.
Even though there's aspects of that in all of these Newman movies, which is fascinating, that it seems like he's really drawn to these movies that it's like they seem lighthearted, but there's really like kind of dark, seedy underbelly aspects to it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a good answer to that question, that from my perspective, other than, he can work well in both environments, but he does seem to act really well when he has a good co-star who he can play off of it. It makes you recognize his charisma and the other. It like is a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I would say it shows two sides of the same coin when he's with the co-star and when he's not. I think it's different acting. I think we see in The Hustler, that might be the only example we have right now, where he's not really having a ton of chemistry with any other character on screen. But he carries the weight of that tone on his back, and he does it really well. And that's probably his most serious role that we've seen so far in this arc. So I think it's just two different styles of acting, and I think that also shows his range. Would you say, how am I going to phrase this question, I guess? Would you say that, so would you say, I'll just ask this, I'll change the question. Of these four films, would you say that Cool Hand Luke is at the top, and then, this is mine, Cool Hand Luke, it would go Butch Cassidy, then The Sting, then The Hustler?
This is a tough ranking. I think in my eyes, The Sting and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid are pretty close to each other. Mm-hmm. I think I'd give the edge to The Sting right now because I'm more enamored by the plot than I was. I think the Sting does have a tighter plot than Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yes,
but doesn't mean it's necessarily a better movie. It's
kind of, we even mentioned in that episode that the plot is kind of all over the place, and there are these villains that kind of disappear, and then different villains come in Bolivia.
I think this Sting is, traditionally like a little bit more satisfying of a movie because it doesn't.
It's more Nolan, Christopher.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle and it has a like really neat conclusion and kind of a cool twist at the end.
Definitely an Inception.
Which I would be all for, like the ambiguous endings, the No Country for Old Men's, so you'd be like, Ben, of course you would pick Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but for whatever reason I feel like I'm just really enamored with the Sting, so I might give it the edge.
That's fine. That's fine with me.
So maybe I don't always have employ logic or standardization to my film opinions.
So Cool Hand Luke is your number 3?
No, Cool Hand Luke's my number 1.
Okay.
So I was starting with the assumption that Cool Hand Luke is the best.
I see. I should have assumed.
No, you shouldn't have assumed that. I gave all of these movies 4 stars except for maybe The Hustler. So like I have them pretty like even.
Okay.
Together. Cool Hand Luke, I could see an argument for being 4.5, but I have to get there mentally.
Yeah.
With that,
for sure. When it comes to kind of the film in general, in the Oscars, it pretty much swept. I don't know how many Oscars it won. You can kind of check that while I continue. And all I know is it went up against The Exorcist in 1973, and The Exorcist was kind of slated to win. Here comes this movie at the end of the year, right? Christmas Day, just is a commercial success. I think that it played into the Christmas season, and people are out. They can go to the theaters and watch things. But The Exorcist was slated to win everything, but then they were both nominated for 10 awards, and The Sting kind of sweeps, and The Exorcist still gets some, but The Sting really beats The Exorcist. The funny thing is there was some background drama. So Warner Bros. Is produced The Exorcist, and originally were pitched The Sting, but then The Sting was rejected by Warner Bros. And they said the producers or the executives said some pretty nasty comments about The Sting regarding that they didn't want to produce the film or make it. And then eventually The Sting comes back with a sting and kind of defeats The Exorcist. But those are the two most legendary films that came out in 1973. And really, Warner Bros. Should have known, I think, if they were about to cast even Jack Nicholson, like if you have Paul Newman on that slate, or Robert Redford, even if George Roy Hill is slated to direct it, there isn't really any reason why you shouldn't pick that up, because it's going to be a commercial success, even if it's not a great film, just because of Robert Redford and Paul Newman. So that was bad on Warner Bros., but in the end, we're 50 years out. It's fine now. 51 years.
Yeah, I think, if you don't base everything purely on the Oscars, because the Oscars aren't very political. Nobody really knows how it all works, and you're always gonna have these opinions on. I was just listening to the Pulp Fiction podcast, and it's crazy to think like Pulp Fiction, Shawshank, and Forrest Gump all came out in the same year, and everyone was like, Forrest Gump is the best of those three movies. And I would say, I'm not even the biggest Shawshank fan, but I'm like, and Shawshank wasn't a big commercial success initially, so it might have played a factor. But for Pulp Fiction to lose to either of those two films, and for like the impact it's had, not that each of those films hasn't had their own unique impact on movies, it's crazy. But The Exorcist won in the long run, in the fact that when people think of movies, they're gonna think of The Exorcist before they think of The Sting.
Yeah,
The Sting is a legendary movie, but it doesn't have because the horror aspect in of The Exorcist, and the fact that it changed, I think, people's desire to watch horror movies, the way that it was more acceptable it was more artistic almost to watch horror movies, at least in the US. Before that there were a lot of schlocky B movies.
Well, in Japan, I would say in Japan there were already some artistic horror movies.
Yeah, and I think Italy maybe there were, and some other places like that. But in the US, definitely The Exorcist made it. You could all of a sudden do all this difference, and they eventually did with Halloween and so forth. So Exorcist will always have that place in history, whereas The Sting's a little bit, it's a little bit, it's got its own niche, but you could trace back a lot of different directions, and people don't think about it right off the top of their head as much, I would guess. But that doesn't change the fact that it won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, Adaptation, and it was nominated for Best Sound, Best Cinematography, and Redford was nominated for Best Actor. Did not win. So I was looking at what it was going against. So the best pictures from that year were The Sting, which won, A Touch of Class, never heard of it, The Exorcist, American Graffiti, which is a good movie, and then Ingmar Bergman's Cries and Whispers, which you're that's the movie that you're everyone who's in the Oscars probably knew Ingmar Bergman was a great director, but he's not gonna there's no way that movie was gonna win Best Picture, not because people in the U.S. still don't really care that much about foreign film to this day, so they definitely didn't care about it back then. Best Actor was won by Jack Lemmon, who I was really? For a movie called Save the Tiger, which could be a great movie, but I've never heard of it.
Interesting.
And I don't know who won Best Cinematographer over The Sting, but they swept a bunch. They won a lot.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And rightfully, it's a great film.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, Ben, this was the one I was going to ask earlier, but I found a way to phrase it. It's hard for me to package things in my head sometimes and disseminate information.
Completely agree with that.
No, for me, yes, it's hard for me too. That you agree with that.
Oh, it's hard for me to
No,
do
it's
that.
really not for you. Words flow out of your mouth like Amazon packages. It's great. So anyway, I already unpackaged it. I unboxed it. I did an unboxing video of my words. No. So, Rise of the Anti-Hero, right? You have Paul Newman always playing this anti-hero, but maybe not fully anti-hero, given a twist where he's kind of a good guy, Despicable Me style player. These films are becoming more and more popular in the 60s and especially into the 70s, and then from then on, you have the 80s Pulp Fiction and 90s 90s, and just from then on, you just have only anti-hero stories, and now it doesn't even matter if they're good or bad. Like, as long as they're alive, they're, worth something. But, sorry, I digress. But what is the impact this has, not just on Hollywood, but on the viewers and kind of culture in general? And I'm thinking, like, big picture, really, really big picture. Not big picture from The Ringer, like, big picture philosophically. Not just the rise of the anti-hero, but the rise of films that kind of promote no consequences for pulling a sting like this.
That is a great question. I don't feel like I have like an amazing answer because there's like a lot of different directions that you could go with it. But this whole idea that like the change, I think maybe this is going to be a hot take, but maybe the turn of the 60s into the 70s, and I hope we get lots of opportunities to talk about more films from this time period, was like the most important time period on the direction that movies would go in the future. And of course now we have, we are, you and I know it best. We are like bombarded now with like so many different options, like way more options than people had. Like back then you would just go watch The Sting. So like your idea of movies and characters and stuff was like completely kind of captivated by whatever Hollywood was pushing out. And so at this time they were pushing out tons of movies like this. On the surface, I would say from a philosophical perspective, it's not necessarily bad to have movies like this if you're assuming that your entire audience is like really good at critical thinking, they have a strong moral base, they can kind of grapple with these ideas. But that's not necessarily the case. And as humans, the whole reason why we have movies like this is because there are like actually people, like we as people are to some extent maybe a less exciting version of like all these characters in these movies. But it's not necessarily our natural desire when we watch movies is to like idolize whoever we see on screen. Like Paul Newman's cool. Like that's the whole idea of a movie star. You're like, I want to be the movie star. So then you want to kind of like be whatever character the movie star is, because that is the movie star. It's not really, the movie star isn't really like Paul Newman in real life. It's Paul Newman in whatever character he plays.
I've always had this thought, is it worth it? Sorry to cut you off. Like, there's definitely a balance between relating to a character and trying to be like that character. I think of like Captain America. Like, I can't really relate to Captain America.
I'm not
I promise you that.
Yeah.
But I really want to be like him, right? I idealize him. I idolize him in some ways. And Paul Newman's characters are always these, it seems like relatable character, but in this, he's really not. In The Sting, he's more of the idolizing type of guy. He's not really the relatable character that we can be like, oh yeah, that's me. He's more of the idolizing, like, no, I want to be like him. I want to be more like him. Not that he's
I want to be the greatest at something. He's the greatest con artist.
But
like,
I would argue that
he's the greatest at something.
But I would argue that the hustler, he's more relatable because he lets himself get in the way, even though he is the best at pool.
And you don't want to be like him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think there's a balance.
You see all of the downsides of everything that he does.
There's a balance of relating and idolizing. Those are two characters, and how do we relate to those types of characters?
And I hesitate to bring up this movie, but it might start a conversation because I think this movie, rumor mill, might be on the docket here soon. But a movie that would be like a true anti-hero like staple is Taxi Driver. And that movie, you're like, you go from a guy who like is knows that they're doing something wrong, they haven't necessarily justified it, right? Like, he knows he's a con artist.
Yeah.
He knows it's wrong. He's deciding to do it. So he has this, Paul Newman's character, Gondorf, he has this like self-awareness. Like, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Taxi Driver takes that to the next level, where now all of a sudden I'm so disenfranchised. I've become so enraged by like these systems and the way that I've perceived that I've been pushed down in my life, and that I've created a totally new outlook and philosophy on life that from the outside you would be like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But internally it makes sense to this person.
Yeah.
So you're seeing that take place on screen. That is an experience that is relatable, but the people who are relating to it are like an actual person who could, you know, be dangerous if they become empowered to be like, oh, look at what this person is doing on screen.
Yeah.
And they're thinking things that I'm thinking. And now I want to be like this person. That's not the point of the movie. That's not what the director is intending for the audience to see.
Sure.
But it is a way that the audience member can interpret it, and then...
And maybe a real great con artist is out there and can relate to Paul Newman's
Yeah,
character.
yeah. I'm just saying, like, generally speaking, this movie wouldn't probably make anyone want to do anything that was
and hopefully,
pull off
generally
the big
speaking,
con.
nobody relates to Taxi Driver.
Right. I'm just saying this would be like the devil's advocate argument for like why you should, like, movies like this are like potentially dangerous, but you know, then all the arguments about limiting art forms. Listen, and like putting a moral
danger in making movies is, in America, it doesn't make it. Like, the movie The Interview is a great example of this, where you just have a film that has no point. It's not even a great comedy film. It's not even like
that's like funny. Somewhat funny, but
it like almost ruined global politics for being banned in North Korea and depicting the North Korean dictator as like a fool.
Yeah,
even though he is, and I say that with
but
full
it like could have a
integrity,
real like legitimate geopolitical impact just by existing.
No, it exists, and it spread rumors, but like there have been films that, you know, Kim Jong-un hates way more than that, you know, that spread capitalist ideologies, you know,
which is worse than making fun of him. Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot. I feel like we'll maybe with our upcoming series we'll have more time to dive into these like ideas of like
psychology,
but most of it has to do with like the trends of culture in general, right?
We should
like, of like identity politics and this like idea of American individualization and all of this stuff that like we need to think about, because a lot of it is just like kind of, regardless of our like moral philosophy, our religious beliefs and all of that, we have all these beliefs that are just kind of ingrained in us, that we don't necessarily have a reason to believe. It's just kind of our natural tendency because we're around so many people who kind of are like, if you think
about it, Ben,
this is what we believe, and you kind of have to peel those away from what is actually true and right, and be like, this is something that I'm just by osmosis have taken from the culture. It's not actually something that I should believe or should agree with.
I was thinking about this. I ate my 21st burger today, right? Which my next burger is my golden burger because I'm 22. And I was eating and I was thinking to myself, oh, eating is really a belief, right? You're believing that the molecules of digestion are happening, you know, and that your body is going through, you know, whatever processes you need to store up ATP or not store up glucose into glucagon, and just keeping that for later, and then your body needs to break it down. Like, those are all beliefs. Even if you don't know those molecules, like, you're still believing that something's happening, right? And you realize that, like, it's so small that you can't see it. So, like, there's belief there. But it's like, you can't disconnect the belief from the natural. Like, I believe that I'm eating food right now and that this food is going to nourish me. But, like, we all have frameworks, and, like, they're based on something that is tangible, you know? So I think of, like, films like this where Paul Newman is representing this anti-hero, and this is like the rise of the people who do bad things, but they're really good looking, so it's fun. And I'm thinking, like, what belief is this ingraining in specifically America? And it's really like kind of a bad, you know, message.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, it's not really based in any physical, tangible reality, you know? In real life, there would be worse consequences to something like this. Like, you know, Robert Redford and Paul Newman's characters aren't Hooker and Gandalf aren't just gonna, or Gandalf,
Gondorf. I think. It's a weird name.
They're not just gonna walk away guilt free. You know, these aren't based in reality. Like, these are beliefs that are being ideologized and ingrained into cinema culture and into Hollywood, and they're just not true. Like, you can make a film that propels or some type of belief and makes it look perfect, but it's just not in reality. And people, again, like I said, with the relating versus idolizing, people will idolize Paul Newman's character in this and be like, okay, well, he has no guilt, he just walks away scotch-free, and so does Robert Redford. Try to follow that ideology, realize that it's not true, and think that they're the problem, or that the world is the problem. And it just creates a cycle of unhealthy habits and behaviors. So although this film is really fun, I think it's part of a large problem. And I think every film that we've done on this podcast is part of a larger problem of just sin in general, but also just like propelling ideologies that, like, it's okay to be bad. You know that song, I'm having a bad day. It's about time that I get my way. The Despicable Me song. It always goes. Just like Despicable Me. I'm telling you, every time it goes back. You know, what happens? Gru can't live with it. Gru eventually moves on, starts a family, gets married, has kids. Well, gets kids, then gets married. And then, you know, now he has a son. He realizes that he can't be a villain forever because there's guilt there once he faces the realities of there are children in the world. And children change a lot. Man, I can't wait for little Timmy to come along. So then you can face some things in your life.
Mm-hmm. I always said that's when I'll really become an adult.
When you have kids, yeah.
That's not becoming a nurse. It's not all of these other milestones.
It's definitely not. I mean, you can think of nurses. I can think of med students. Like, they're really not adults.
No, they might become trained to be good at one particular role in life. That doesn't make you.
But I know some of them listen to this, so I'll say, like, all the ones that I've met right now are awesome. So
yeah, good job, guys. Yeah. Proud of you.
Yep.
That stirs up so many thoughts and ideas. I tend to agree with you that these, because there's a difference between artistic intention and then impact.
Okay. Yes. I'll digress one last little tiny thought. Showing a bad ideology in a good light, I think, is the problem.
Yeah. Okay.
And I wouldn't say that showing, like, someone
it'd be almost impossible to make any movie without ever showing any bad ideology ever.
But I think, like, a movie like Taxi Driver, where we know the main character is in the wrong, I would say that's different. I think it's artistic direction, auteur theory. I think that's a big part of it. You have to believe that.
Yeah. I agree. But it's interesting how, like, in my theory, like, potentially people misunderstanding a movie like Taxi Driver could have it could have a worse individual impact on somebody's life. But it's kind of their fault. You have to it's also about placing individual responsibility, right? Like, you are responsible for your actions. Yeah, you are, like, you could have all these, like, arguments about whether, you know, you should make these kind of movies, whether
that's
you should be promoting
in the healthcare
kind of movies.
That makes me so mad. There are so many things that we take responsibility for that are the patient's. Never mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's
not allowed to say.
That's
anything.
true. That's true. But yeah, you have to take individual responsibility too. You can't be like, I became this way because of these movies, and now I'm going to fully blame these movies. And there's movies about how movies potentially are negatively impacting people, like Videodrome, you know? Or like,
don't go watch that. Please do not.
They're like, it's weird because they're like gross, grimy movies, but they're pointing at an actual truth that
Kubrick can't stop. That's the thing. He's really good at that. I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey, when that baby comes up, you realize exactly what it means. Not.
Yeah. So, you know, have these conversations. Think about these things.
It's all about creating a discussion.
It's about a discussion that leads to nowhere, but it's a discussion.
Yeah, your favorite ambiguous discussion. And I don't know.
Somebody was talking. Ethics class got brought up in a discussion that I was in this week, or like just ethics classes in general, and everyone was like, I hate ethics classes. They just go around in circles and there's never a right answer. And I was like, that is a good point. Like a lot of these ideas about ethics and stuff, when the conversation isn't really grounded in any sort of
absolute truth, then they are just kind of like interesting but circular conversations that That's
never
what I'm
go
saying,
anywhere.
without a solid ground. And the thing is, I mean, we could go in 18 different directions. I know we're running out of time soon, but I mean, you're trying to stay up all night anyway.
Yeah, I'm like not running out of time.
'Cause
You're
you
running out of time.
It's like that song by I almost said Tyler Joseph. I'm Tyler the Creator. They're running out of time. Or Time by Childish Gambino. Sorry, he's been on my mind ever since his new album, but don't listen to him either. I don't listen to him on a regular basis, but yeah, I mean, I brought all of this up. The last 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes of conversation to finally get to the question: do you think Paul Newman can only play bad characters?
That is a good question. I mean, he's only really proved to us that he's
exactly
going to play bad characters.
Does he know his limitations? Could he ever be a Steve Rogers?
I think that the interesting aspect of Paul Newman is that he knows his charisma, and I think there's some sort of cohesive relationship between this anti-hero role that's starting and this idea that, like, to be charismatic, you can't be like the straight arrow guy. You can't be the clean, otherwise you wouldn't be cool.
Okay,
right?
so you think he's trying to be
the
cool.
whole idea of cool is associated with not doing things the right way.
Okay.
So that's why I think that his acting style doesn't really fit with. Now, I'm sure maybe they tried to do this at some point in his career, because usually when actors get really kind of like, oh, they do this all the time, they eventually try to do a movie where they like don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that would be Steve Martin in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, where he's like always the goofy actor in every movie, and then all of a sudden he's the straight guy.
But he does awesome.
And he's awesome. But
you should listen to that. I think that's episode 48 or something.
That's like episode 16. 16? This is way back.
Never mind.
Yeah. But
maybe 18.
That's just the first example that came to my mind because I watched that movie so much. So maybe eventually in his career they tried to do that. But whatever this role that he's found that he's like, I'm good at this, it's just cohesive, and it's just in this time frame where they're making all these movies that are all of a sudden like, we don't have to follow these codes anymore. Yeah, we can just the Hays codes, and we can do all these different things. And so naturally, I mean, all art, if you know anything about art, it's all about, having these plateau moments and then these breakthrough moments. So all of a sudden when you can do something, you will do it. People will do it. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Sometimes it will go well, sometimes it won't. And then eventually that gets stale and tired. So now I almost wonder, we're in this weird age where I'm like, well, we had Breaking Bad, we had Better Call Saul, we had, a couple Marvel movies that were we had the Joker, maybe not Marvel movies as much, maybe like Deadpool, these kind of movies. I almost wonder whether we're going back to more of the, like, we live in an age where, for better or for worse, most people feel like they have a moral high ground on whatever issue they believe in. Mm-hmm. Either side of the issue, they believe they have a moral high ground. Yeah. So people still have this, whatever it's rooted in, they have now this like strong sense of like, you have to believe these things, otherwise you're wrong, and I don't want to talk to you, and I want to kind of be apart from you. I want to set myself apart. So it might set up for more movies that are like not as anti-hero-y, because we again have these, it's not so much like the Wild West of the sexual revolution. It's different kinds of revolutions. A great way to put that.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it like this. Like, there's this, I don't believe in yin yang. There's this yin yang tug of an internal and external push right now. I would say there's an internal push to responsibility. I think no matter what side you are of the political spectrum or ideologies spectrum, you're being pushed to feel responsible for something, whether you're responsible for global warming or not voting for this type of president, or, blah, blah, blah.
Wars in other countries, people feel, I say I don't want to, you can't not make things political, but I don't always like bringing up hot button issues just because sometimes they're just inflammatory for being inflammatory's sake. But when I say wars, you generally can think of the wars that I'm talking about. But people, due to social media,
we've done movie reviews on that.
You understand more of what's going on. You know what's happening, and so people tend to feel more responsibility because they see these things happening to saying. Yeah. Whereas, 50 years ago, you might not know what's going on.
Yeah.
So you don't care because you don't know.
You're being catechized by the world no matter what. So they're saying, do you affirm these things? So there's this internal push of responsibility from anyone, right? Yeah. They're saying that you should be this way, you should be that. But there's also this external push of morality, I would say. Because although we're trying to hold ourselves and other people to be responsible for some type of thing, the external push is like, no, I'm not really, like, it's not really about my morals. It's more about these external causes, like these movements or these ideologies or political campaigns, rather than my own actions in my own life, because what I do in my life is what I do. You know, it's this postmodern idea. And having to balance this internal and external push creates a lot of calamity, because you can't just have these responsibilities but then also not worry about your own actions at the same time. So that's kind of the troubling aspect of these anti-hero stories. So it's less of even though we're seeing less of Deadpool, less of Breaking Bad, and maybe we're seeing more heroic stories come about. Like I saw Ted Lasso, and it's a very wholesome story, right? So we're seeing some of these wholesome, but at the same time, we're not as concerned with morality.
Yeah.
Like you have characters that are just openly doing dumb things, but they're the protagonist.
Yeah.
And they're not seeing that as wrong.
In some senses, there's certain things that used to be issues that people have kind of moved on from as being moral issues. And so, and they assume they can live their life in these ways without thinking of these things as issues. I can kind of see what you're saying. And now they've started to move on to some of these big picture things that they now see as issues. But they also, whereas you have an ability to change things that happen individually in your life, and like change the way that you live. It can be difficult. It can be like hard to break habits, but you have the ability to like acknowledge these things and be like, oh, this is something that I need to work on or I need to fix. You can't fix these external things that you're supposed to, but you still have this big push to like feel like you have to be involved. If you're not involved, if you don't say something, again with social media, it's like, you know, all of a sudden everyone, no matter if you're important to people or you're not, you like are expected to have a stance on a gazillion things that you have not all the information on. You can never have all the information on. It can feel like you have more information than maybe you would have, 20 years ago, but you still don't have all the information, but you're still expected to like make these opinions, take these stances, boycott, do all these different things based on, the flow of, it ends up being groups of people that you follow, or political movements or ideologies or a different mishmash of those things.
And the tension between taking responsibility for things you can't control and rejecting responsibility of your own life, that really does change Hollywood and cinema culture, because now the films, like you said, are going away with morals and kind of focusing on these larger picture issues that a singular person can't, change.
And some of these movies, not saying that if you like take individual moments, and I'd be like, there would be moments in films I can think of that I would maybe question like the intent behind choosing to do certain things now, and more people would question the intent for sure about some of the things I'm thinking about, but they wouldn't like, it would be a lot more, people would come up with a lot more things to be concerned about the movies, that back then it was more, people who would be concerned about this movie would be concerned about them because they're violent and shocking and they deal with these like heavy issues, and they deal with them in that way. Now people are not concerned about the movies because they're violent
or nudity or cussing
or these like moral issues. They're concerned about them because of more philosophical issues. This is almost a breakthrough for me, because I almost didn't think about it this way. I was like, we don't really, we're very desensitized.
See, this is the thing. Like, Ben, I tried to package it with the internal, but you're explaining it in a more clear sense right now. So you have this really good delivery apparatus.
I've had conversations with people and they're like, oh yeah, like this director said that something was violent. I was like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah. And I was like, I was like, that doesn't really disturb me at all. Yeah. But I was like, maybe that is a little bit concerning that.
Well, as you added, once we review Taxi Driver, that'll show how far we've gone with
that. It's just, it doesn't really disturb me. And I guess I do work in a profession where I see an abnormal, it's not violence, an abnormal level of human suffering.
No, it is violent. It is like truly, it's called a trauma center for a reason. I
Yeah,
mean, you see some disgusting things.
It's violent. It's so in some ways, I mean, in some senses, deliberately, I was like, I have to be able to watch some of these things to be able to stomach like real life.
Yeah.
Like in a weird, kind of way. You're like, somehow you have to build up a tolerance.
I mean,
to
some of the
be able
grossest
to,
things you see
Yeah.
are going to be not in movies,
yeah.
unfortunately.
So maybe that's not the experience of the normal person, but certainly, and sometimes you're like, yeah, of course the director would say that because they see some sort of artistic intent behind this. They're not, and maybe they're being a little bit hyperbolic in the way that they say.
But art has to have meaning. Listen, this is the whole postmodern. We talked about this 8 times before, but I don't know if you agree with my framework yet, or if you've come around to it. Where with postmodernism, where you have a bunch of random throw up pieces on the wall, right, and you pick the pieces of truth out and kind of synthesize those and kind of fight against the pieces that aren't truth.
Yeah,
and I think with a movie like this, like, it's not postmodern. But if you go to a film like Nomadland with no meaning at all, right? Just no meaning whatsoever.
well, like almost like realism to the, like, it's basically a documentary that's not a documentary.
Yeah, and there could be some good to that, right? But
Yeah.
Nomadland doesn't get to any point, even though it deals with homelessness. That's like in nomad danger.
You're right, but I could see your argument for that.
It doesn't take a stance on any of it, and it just kind of shows it ambiguously, almost pointlessly. And I think there are truths to be picked from that. Like, right, like there are people in that situation suffering. There are people who are doing fine, camping for their whole life. Even though I wouldn't necessarily agree with the philosophy completely, and I think that it disrupts human congregation
or like community
socializing.
Yeah.
I think it disrupts community and your ability to build consistent relationships and raise kids well.
It also just would not be practical for the entire world to believe in being nomads, because there would be no infrastructure. Everything would get messed up. So from a large scale level,
we've seen the Divergent series, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Hunger Games, I mean, that's what it turns out to be, except everyone's not teenagers.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know if you've come around to that framework, but that's the whole story of postmodern. Like, art has to have meaning, and we can't just get by with throwing a banana and duct taping it to a wall. That's not going to fly.
Somebody had to do it, though.
Somebody had to do it.
Art has momentum.
If you said poop on the floor, I would do it for $1 million. That's the thing. Like, I'm not going to judge that.
I mean, and the performance art stuff, I mean, that stuff's nuts. I mean, I don't even, but then you're also like, do you have to have a definition of art? Like, have you heard of the guy who like hired someone to like shoot him in the foot as performance art? Is that art? Or is that just being stupid?
No, that's violence.
I mean, yeah, it's just, I mean, that's not, we're stretching the definition.
That's self-harm. That's something that you and I oath to not let happen.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's disgusting. I can't believe we like let that.
But I mean, sure, it was some sort of, there was some sort of political stance that they were taking with doing
like
that.
What?
I don't know, but there was, I'm sure. If I did, maybe next episode.
Save the bunnies. Something like that.
Yeah, it was something, but
if it's a war, then that's a little bit more serious.
Sometimes people are just a little messed up, maybe a lot messed up in the head, and
it's because they watch Taxi Driver.
It could be that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this has got far more philosophical than I was originally thinking that the episode about this thing would get.
Well, if you think about it, every philosophical conversation that you have is always more philosophical than you originally intended it to.
Because it just forces you to ask more questions.
Yeah, because philosophy is the thought of thinking about thoughts deeper, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like you have to start simple and then like ask deeper questions eventually. So like the nature of philosophical conversations, start shallow, become deeper. You can't just start in the deep unless you're like a trained philosopher. I almost said philosopher.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. And what's fascinating about philosophy is that you can have such a rich way of understanding words and still be like so far off of actual truth.
Yeah.
You can like devote your whole life to like creating a philosophy that's just like not even close to being right. And it can sound really amazing.
And you'll be in a textbook.
Yeah, and you'll be in a textbook, you'll have a name, people will bring up your name all the time. It can be just like so wrong.
But then the next Nero or Napoleon burns this place to the ground.
And the weird thing about philosophers is I'm not even sure they'd be mad about their whole philosophy being wrong, because it might not really be like, is it just all mental, like you get a satisfaction out of just being able to convince people that like your thoughts have like a deeper meaning.
Well, it depends on your philosophy, because some people, subject that the physical, or, I don't know, they postulate that the physical isn't real and that the mental, and then you have Plato's ideal world of forms, and then you have, Aristotle's thought on that. The thing is, like, who cares?
Yeah.
At the same time, let philosophy just be a road to where you're trying to go. Don't let it become like, don't play on the road. You tell your kids, don't just go playing soccer on the road.
Yeah.
Drive on the road. Let it be a route or a means to go somewhere. But get off on the exit when you need to get off.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, you could go down so many rabbit trails, but like, once
and
you get a sound enough philosophy
Yeah.
for something, like get off the exit.
And they would be eventually they would become a huge waste of time.
Yeah, some people just sit on the road and wait for a semi to hit them and die in their own philosophy.
Yeah. That's absolutely the case. That's absolutely the case.
And they all have amazing beards.
Mm-hmm. That is also true.
Do you see us having beards one day as we podcast?
I mean, I got some like whiskers here, but I feel like I'm a long ways away from like a good healthy
Your brother
beard.
has a pretty great beard.
He does have a good beard. So if I can get those genetics on my side, maybe here in a few years.
How could you get?
But he already had a beard at this
genetics.
point, so I don't.
He had a beard at your age?
Yeah, like right now at my
He's only
age.
2 years older than you?
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense. I guess I knew you 2 years ago.
Yeah. So I don't know whether I also haven't really tried this, but I just feel like I'm still so patchy, it's like not like there's hair in some places.
You have a different build than him.
Yeah.
I would wait and just kind of test
feel it out. Yeah, it's kind of like I let the 5 o'clock shadow grow out a little bit, and then I shave, and that's kind of my pattern. It's like shave every 6 or 7 days, let it grow out a little bit.
Every 6 to 7 days.
Yeah, I let it grow out. I mean, I let it like. I don't think it looks bad when it's like a little rough, but then it gets to the point where it's like, okay, it looks a little.
This is
like
how I know I
shaved.
legit have OCD, is because I shave every single morning.
You shave every single morning. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I could shave every day, like whether it be practical, but probably every other day I could shave.
I go through razors so fast.
Yeah, maybe that's the other thing. I don't like spending money, so I'm like, longer on the razor.
Because the difference between me and you is that I like spending money and you don't. That's
well, I don't know whether you like spending money, but you're just like more willing to, without guilt, spend money.
I guess you're right. Yeah, I kind of have a problem with that sometimes. Like, I bought AirPods today because my AirPods are lost and it's been 2 weeks and I haven't looked for them yet, but I could. But I think the opportunity cost was higher to waste time looking for them than to spend $180.
Yeah.
So if that tells you how important I think I am and how inflated I think my time is, that's a telltale sign.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not really even good the way that I think about money, because it doesn't mean I'm not going to spend the money on the thing it just means I'm going to feel bad about it, but I'm still
sure.
So I'm not really accomplishing anything because I'm still getting whatever that I like feel guilty about.
Yeah.
Or I feel guilty about it later, but I already bought it. It's too late. So.
That's a feeling that I've had before. You just reminded me of many things, but also like I'd say the last 2 years before I got my med school loans, like I was pretty much like once a month borrowing money from someone and then having to pay them back when I got the next paycheck, like for 2 years straight. Now that I have these med school loans, I feel like I'm rich, even though it's like borrowed time. It's like, but that's life. You're living on borrowed time. Your life isn't yours,
That
Use
is
it
true.
well, spend it well. And eventually you'll pay back more than what you gave it, right? A fifth more is what the Bible says. But really in medical school, it's going to be maybe pretty close to a fifth more. So
or more than that.
Maybe more. I don't know. We'll see how the interest rates go. But I think I'm locked in at a 7.5% right now. So we'll see. But anyway, I feel great. I'm not stressed about money. I never was stressed about money, but maybe that's why I felt like pretty guilt-free when I would buy things randomly, like some disgusting bread bowl from Panera or a $5 burrito on Tuesdays with you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The latest thing I got that I definitely did not need, but I really wanted, so I got it, was from Connor O'Malley's Stand-Up Solutions special. He had a joke about Toyota RAV4s, and I own a Toyota RAV4. So I got a shirt that had Toyota RAV4s on the back. I really did not need that. And it was probably way more than it was worth. But
I don't
I
think
still
I've done
got
anything like that in a while. So you might have overstepped
Yeah,
a little.
but this is part of also like I'm also living on my first like real income. So now that like the amount of money that's coming
splurge
in,
a little bit, and you splurge on
it feels like it makes it
Connor
okay.
O'Malley, not Connor O'Malley.
Yeah, no, it's Connor O'Malley.
Oh, I'm thinking of the actor. I forget who. Stand-up special RAV4 T-shirt.
Yeah, so maybe you should limit those purchases. Like I'm gonna feel bad about it, but then again, I did also purchase it, so I'm not really accomplishing.
But if we ever
anything.
come out with Movie Vault merch,
you should
we've been
buy
hyping up for the last 4 years.
You should buy, and maybe the truth is you don't need a bigger house. If you want Toyota RAV4 shirts, just live in a smaller house.
Yeah, downsize. In fact.
Yeah,
and use that
downsize.
extra
The
money.
people in Europe live in like they have families in the size of my apartment.
People in Japan have capsules.
Yeah,
They pay
So,
$900 a month for a capsule.
part of it being in America is realizing I don't need to live in a 5,000 square foot house. Like that is not a need.
That's why you come here, but that's not why you stay.
Yeah. And in fact, it might not even be practical to live in a 5,000 square foot house because you have to clean all of that
And
space.
Butler interest rates are higher than ever.
And you have to hire a cleaning lady, and it just gets
Or
very
man.
expensive. And then you find out these houses aren't even built that well.
Yeah.
Like for the amount of money you spend on them, they're using the absolute lowest grade possible.
Well, it's because of BlackRock and Vanguard.
yeah,
you know what I
and
mean?
and all that, you know. And yeah, you won't even be able to buy a house anymore. So don't even think about that.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we get into that again, I mean, we've had that conversation.
This is all the conversations I have with people now. Oh yeah, the housing market's pretty bad.
Yeah.
I want to move, but I'm pretty stuck in my house right now because the housing market's pretty bad.
But why can't we just be content?
Hopefully I'll be able. Yeah, everyone always wants to move and like do different things. They're like everybody that I work with is like already focused on like what they want to do next, and like
Just be content.
it's hard to be like eventually, no matter what you do. This is something I've realized, and it's taken me a while. No matter what you do, because you spend your whole life like you're building towards something, and then sometimes it's hard when you get there because you're like all of a sudden you're just supposed to do that thing for a long time.
Ben, you and I are in the
But
same
like
boat.
no matter what you do, even if it takes you longer to get there, at some point you stagnate. Like
you mean like at the
you
levels?
Yeah, like you are doing the same thing.
No, I'm never gonna do that.
Okay, maybe you won't. I mean,
You can change it. You can spice it up.
yeah, you can spice it up. You can do different things, but like things get repetitive and redundant eventually, no matter what you do.
Okay.
There's different ways that they like are.
You might be right. Yeah. Like
But you know
day
what I
in,
mean?
day out,
Like
on a daily basis.
On a daily basis, yeah. Like if you become a neurosurgeon, like it sounds like a crazy, and it is a crazy profession, but you train for a really long time. You're like building to this whole thing. And then eventually you're going to be a neurosurgeon for 20 years. And by the 20th year, you're like, okay, so I do this and this and this, and I can almost do it in my sleep
Yeah.
because I've done it so much.
Yeah.
Not that there's not unique aspects to every case and like
Yeah.
things that you've never seen before and that, but it still becomes like a job. It's a job.
No, you're right. In primary care, I'm gonna be doing a lot of like, all right, where are you 1 to 10?
Yeah. Oh, so you have a cough?
They'll be
Okay.
like, my arm is severed. Please
Yeah.
don't ask me that question.
Yes. Oh, so how much pain are you? Well, I need a number.
Yeah,
You don't understand.
For pain medication,
You could say it
We're
hurts.
talking-
I need a specific number.
you can't be. What is the word? Search. What's the?
Pain seeking.
Yeah, pain.
Yeah. Your
med seeking.
your hands sawed off. You might be a drug seeker. Got to make sure.
Yeah, it's sad. It is a sad reality, but I forget what I was talking
Anyway,
about.
I'm going through my whole like things that I've thought about as I've like sometimes have crises about like did I do the right profession or that this
Well,
or
just
that
be content.
until realizing that like your profession should really not be a huge part of it. Should be it's a significant part of what you do. It's a reality of life that like actually the fall of man is that we have to work. Now it used to be toiling the field. Now it's like a million other things that are different levels of challenging on different scales of physical
That's
to
why
mental.
I think. That's actually why I think kids like Minecraft, because I think there's something like deep inside, especially of children, when it's not buried. Those feelings aren't buried, like with distractions and self-medication.
Yeah.
That like there's something. Not my friend Jared. He's been on the podcast a few times. He says the children yearn for the mines. Right.
But maybe they actually do. Like maybe there's
some kind of innate since Adam to toil, to work, to keep.
And maybe that's why we struggle so much with like being like this is like I am this, and maybe I don't want to be this anymore. I want to be that, and that would make me feel better about myself if I did this other thing. I don't know.
Explain that.
I don't know. I've never been like, I don't have the desire. Some people just actually don't desire to work at all. They desire to just like live and not have to work.
Well, that's laziness. That's just complete gluttony of time.
I've never had a hard time with that. It's always just been like the paralyzing fear that you're going to end up doing something that you don't like, or that you could have done something that you would like better, but you didn't like push yourself hard enough, or you didn't, there's like this, this like, but you will never know a lot of these things. They're like,
well, you'll never know. And even if you do know, like, don't dwell on it.
Yeah. And you can't dwell on it. And also a lot of times the root issue is like not real. It's like kind of a pride issue. It's like, at the end of the day, so it's like deep down, it's like there's some sort of insecurity or something that's really at the core of like why you have some of these crises, at least in my life, to get a little personal.
Yeah.
To get a little personal.
I just got to know you more.
Yeah.
So maybe I can discover your packaging secrets.
Yeah. So anyway, that's to say, I do like, there's a lot of very rewarding aspects to the career I'm currently in. I've done it for, it feels like about a month.
You looked
even
at your
though,
watch.
even though it's been 3 months technically, but I still have a whole lot to learn. So if I'm complaining about not being in school, I mean, I have no excuses. I have a lot to learn and know and grow in, and be able to make better and better decisions and work better. So I really should not complain.
You are the bread and butter of the medical field, truly.
Well, I don't. Thank you. We don't really need to be buttered up. We're a little bit bad about being. I don't know. I shouldn't really speak on behalf of nurses. I've only been one for 3 months.
But what? Sick of what?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think nurses have sometimes feel overvalued or undervalued, but now maybe
you almost said overvalued.
Overvalued. Well, we need to not go too like crazy with the praise all the time.
All right. Well, some of you guys complain
because sometimes we complain about it like too much.
Yeah. I mean, I hear it when I walk by.
Some of it's just about understanding different perspectives.
Dude,
it's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah. Did you hear what that patient said? She was so rude. I don't know. Those are the conversations. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah.
But there are some of the best people I've met. Like, there's this woman that works for my boss. She is one of the best nurses I've ever met, and I really look up to her medical practice. It's great.
Anyway.
Do you have any movie highlights?
I actually do. Do you have any?
I think I only have one movie highlight.
Let's go. Let's start with you first.
Okay. I think it's called Mary and Max.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it.
It was really, really good.
That's a claymation movie, right?
Yep. Directed by Adam Elliott. Stars Philip Seymour Hoffman, Barry Humphries, and Toni Collette in the three main roles. I don't know. It's about Asperger's and mental health and poverty, and it tells it in a really fun, kiddish light, but it deals with serious subject and talks about unaliving as well. I just don't want to get the podcast marked.
Yeah, we're very concerned about getting marked for a lot of things.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's just a lot of time to record, and I spent, this is what, an hour and a half, and I could have went to the Apple Store in an hour and a half. So this is technically worth $180 right now.
Time costs. Yeah, that's true.
So
it's a lot of time.
It's really about pen pals. This younger girl having a pen pal with this older man in New York, and she's a poor girl in Australia. He's a poor man in New York, and they're pen pals for their whole life. They finally get to meet each other, and it's just kind of like what happens. It's really sad. It's truly a sad story. So I was encapsulated. I did not stop the movie, even though I had homework to do, which is why I'm a little bit behind. I watched the Lego movie, rewatched it with one of the kids from church. It's great. I watched Deadpool and Wolverine. I looked up, the parents' guide, and I was like, you know what? It actually doesn't look bad. I think there's a lot of crudeness I don't like. For all three, like Deadpool is never my favorite superhero because it was just like sex jokes. I'm not a big. I don't know. Like some parts I did laugh. Like some of the sex jokes I ashamedly say that I laughed. But it's like some of them were just like lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Like I'm not 14 years old. It felt like their target demographic was the brain of a 14-year-old, realizing that is the average brain level of people above 17, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they know
So-
their audience.
Yeah. So Disney's really good at what they do.
Oh,
But it was
they're
good.
amazing.
It was it was actually a pretty good movie. And I thought it honored the MCU and it really honored the Fox films well. And it kind of closed off the Fox films, setting up future things.
That's good. It's good to hear something good come out of the Disney stuff.
And it's funny. I saw this. It was how many F-bombs are there in the MCU? And I think there are 119 F-bombs in the MCU. There's one in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And 118 in Deadpool and Wolverine. And those are the only 2 films that have F-bombs out of the 30-something films or whatever.
That is funny.
But I'm not back on the MCU train at all. All I'm saying is I'm catching up because I saw the trailer for Brave New World and I thought it looked pretty good. So I'm catching up on Echo and Secret Invasion, and I think that's all I have left. And the Groot shorts, and that's it.
Nice.
Should take a total of 5 hours, I think. So
Beautiful. Well, I did not see Deadpool and Wolverine. Maybe at some point in my life I will. But I did watch The Usual Suspects, and I thought it was excellent. Again, if you like The Sting, I feel like you'd like The Usual Suspects.
that's one of Michael's favorites.
So-
Usual Suspects.
A little bit of irony to it is that both the director and the lead actor, the main actor, have been accused of sexual assault. So if you have big problems with giving royalty, well, I don't even know if they're getting royalties, but just keep that in mind. I just thought that
They're
was
like,
a
ooh,
little
an
bit-
extra shiv in jail.
But they are, a lot of bad people in the movie, so I guess that maybe expect that actually translates to real life sometimes. Allegedly, of course.
Method acting.
On all these, most of these things are like, I think Kevin Spacey actually got acquitted, but that doesn't mean nothing happened.
I heard that the Weinsteins are back.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think it's just really hard with some of these, like the trials are just hard to actually get through on a lot of these.
And I mean, a lot of it is like lack of evidence because it is like people talking.
Yeah.
But you really, in our judicial system, you have to back it up.
Yep.
Even if it's true.
Yeah.
And that's
Could
fortunate.
very,
It
very
really
well.
is.
In these cases, I'm pretty much based on, what you would think that it's true, but I guess you truly don't know without the evidence. And yeah, we have to follow our judicial
And it's good.
system.
Listen, that's a good thing and a bad thing.
Yep.
Because sometimes you just have cases where you know what's right, but there's no evidence,
And yeah, the person gets away with it.
And that's just sometimes how,
I'm sure there's lots of movies about that.
that song, That's Life, That's Life.
Yeah. I watched my favorite movie of the year so far, Irish language rap group Kneecap.
That's the name of the rap group?
Yep. They made a movie about themselves where they're the main characters, and it's called Kneecap.
Okay.
And it's great. It's well shot. It's clever. It creates a very interesting picture about the band, who is they're a Northern Irish Gaelic speaking rap group. So it's very important. I have a friend who's super into Irish and Scottish politics. So I don't know all of these.
Do I know this friend?
He ran cross country with me.
What
so
color hair
probably
does
not.
he have?
He has brown hair.
Okay, then never mind.
You probably don't really know him, but he's super into these like politics in these countries. And so Northern Ireland, part of Ireland, but now part of the UK. So there's a lot of turmoil basically about, the IRA and all of that. So there's a lot of that in the movie. It's a fictionalized version of how their group came together. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of hedonism. That's not great if you're not supportive of that, but it doesn't make it. It's still a fun.
What a great
movie.
way to package that.
There's a lot. They're very braggadocious about it in an Irish way, and one of the funny things is that which this is actually true. The DJ for the group, there's like 2 guys who like grew up in like poorer areas, and then the DJ was like an English high school teacher who like started doing drugs with them. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but in the movie, that's what happens. And then he like becomes this DJ, and it's like,
sorry,
it leads. I mean, eventually it gets really like out of control of what actually happened in real life, but it's very funny. It's unique. It's something like you wouldn't see normally, and because of if you're into the music, which like because they play a lot of their songs, then you start to like really gravitate.
Are you
towards
into the music?
Especially after watching the movie, yes.
Okay. Were there subtitles?
Yes, because they did actually speak in like Irish.
Oh, that would
for
be so
the
hard to
movie.
understand.
Yeah.
for me.
And their rap, like they rap in Irish, some in English, but also in Irish. The words that that are definitely not in Gaelic are cuss words because there's no like, so they'll just be saying Gaelic, then an F-bomb. And they have, I don't know.
That sounds like a very interesting film that I might want to watch.
It's very unique. It had a pretty limited run. We were the only people in the theater.
Who's we?
My friend and I. He was actually going to see it for the second time.
I was scared you took Emma to that. You scared me for that.
I'm smarter than that. No.
Yeah. You're a great husband by not doing
take
that.
Emma to that. And then I watched Alfred Hitchcock. I've been really into Alfred Hitchcock lately.
Oh yeah, you watched Vertigo last couple weeks ago.
I watched Vertigo. I've watched Rear Window, and then I watched North by Northwest.
Okay.
So I feel like I've seen most of his classics by this point. It was like, and North by Northwest is.
Do you remember
incredible.
when we said, "Oh yeah, once I'm married, I'll watch all these movies"? That became a reality.
Yeah, part of it's being on night shift and like having these nights where I'm just like staying up.
Yeah.
And like it's like you don't really lose time technically, but you kind of lose time because nobody else is up at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
So you're doing things like you can't do anything with anybody else except for maybe you because you don't sleep.
That's true. Well, let's just pretend this is the middle of the day and not in the night.
Yeah. So it kind of you kind of feel like you have
don't know
all this wasted time.
Yeah, I could see that, and it's probably a pretty lonely. But you're also married, so like you're not alone, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and then I'll go back to day shift next month.
And I know she works a lot, but like she's doing school. Like I'm sure a lot of that can be flexible a little bit.
Yeah.
So you get to spend time with her.
Yeah. It's a non-traditional schedule. It's not a not workable schedule.
This is what I've learned
I'm
recently.
still learning how to handle it though.
So in my class, there are 224 students, which is more than usual, I think. And my medical school class, and there are less than 40 of us, I think, that went straight from graduation did not take a gap year. And it's still called traditional student, and then non-traditional is taking a gap year. I think that the terminology from the American Association for Medical Colleges should change the terms.
Like a non-traditional student should be a student who like had a whole different career.
No, I think we should get rid of the term altogether.
Because it's becoming
because they're merging too much. I think now that there are more non-traditional students than traditional in all of these medical colleges, why would we hold on to that terminology?
Yeah, that's true. And here's because I looked into going a non-trad route
just revealed that to the world for the first time.
Yeah. And so because I don't want people to think like, so I listened to a lot of information and like looked into a lot of information because you can do that on the internet nowadays. And the thing about it is it's now gotten to the point where people might even think it's advantageous to go a non-traditional route. They're like, it's making my application more compelling. And so they might even purposefully, which I think if you were thinking about it, you might be kind of scaring yourself into doing things that you don't really have to do. You can disagree with this, but like if you were truly non-traditional, like you went into something and you were like, actually, I might want to do medicine. Like that's what you would think of being non-traditional, right? And then you go do all the things you need to do, get into med school. Maybe you worked a different job.
I do agree with
maybe you started you were so far in a career in college that you finished it out and then did what you needed to do.
Well, I had a friend who actually applied, got in to Ohio State, had health problems for like 5 years, and they let him normally they only let you hold your acceptance for a year, and then they kind of made him like half reapply 5 years later, and now he's 32 and he's in my class right now. And he took gap years before applying that first time. But it was just like he's considered a non-traditional student, even though he always had it on his mind too. But it's like there are so many other ways to make yourself stand out. Like I promise you, I feel like, that imposter syndrome. Everybody gets imposter syndrome. Even someone working at McDonald's gets imposter syndrome. Because that's not a lower level thing. Like you said, like your career shouldn't be who you are. Your career is just what you do. And everybody's made differently. And everybody gets imposter syndrome and everything. But in medicine, like it's really easy to get imposter syndrome because some of these people could be, the next.
Well, and because you are surrounded when you get around people who are like experienced, you all of a sudden are like, why do I not know all of these things?
Yes.
Well, it's because you don't have any experience, but you feel like I'm being called the same thing as this person. That's what I'm experiencing right now. I'm being called the same thing as this other person who has 20, 30, 40, maybe even more years of experience than me. So I should I should be able to provide the same level of care and have the same level of knowledge, but I can't because I don't have that experience.
These people have way cooler natural proclivities than I have. Like my natural proclivities, yeah, I'm probably good at memorization and being brutally honest with people. Those are probably the only two strengths that I have in life, and they've carried me thus far. But like some people are just like so cool in my class, and it's very hard to relate to their coolness. You know, like some of these guys are like really tall, buff, and good looking. I'm thinking like, no, you're supposed to be a jock. You're not allowed here. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it makes me mad.
You're like, this is supposed to be like the place where you're like proving that you have worth other than being good looking.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah. This is where the rejects go. So it's like, yeah, it makes me so mad that like someone can have it all. You know?
I'm sure they have their own insecurities.
But here's the thing: I'm content. Yeah. I truly am content. I'm being facetious. I use the word facetiously even. So I think, yeah, I really am content. I don't need a house right now. I have plans for a house.
You can build your own?
Yeah, don't tell my dad. No, I'm not going to build my own. But I do have plans in the next 5 years, like a financial program that I'm in. Anyway, those are some great films that you have in there, Ben. Kneecap is one that I'll probably check out.
Yeah, I would say it was a great movie.
The Irish have really popped off in Hollywood recently.
Yeah.
Barry Keoghan is their headliner right now.
Banshees of Inisherin. That's why I was like, I think that could almost be considered an Irish language film. There might have been some Gaelic in there. So
I'm just proud of the Irish. Yeah. I need to take a 23andMe if the government wouldn't clone me. I need to figure that out if that happens. And I would love
and
to
even
find
then
out how
it's
Irish
like they might clone you anyway, so why even care?
Ben, I'm making this. I'm telling you right now. I'm not going to make a vow because I don't know if I actually want to follow this. But if I am more than 45% Irish, I will quit drinking.
Because you think it'll just like predispose you to like. Genetically.
I have a degree in genetics, and I know that. I don't just think that. So
does that give you a higher tolerance too, or do you not? That's not how that works.
I don't know. I've never tested tolerance. I do a 1 to 2 drink max. So. Everywhere I go, just putting that out there for those kneecappers that want to party all night and sing Gaelic songs
and do drugs and all kinds of other things too.
Well, we're gonna get flagged all day today.
Drugs.
We might as well just say all the words.
Yeah.
What? At what age do you think we have an explicit symbol next to one of the movie vault episodes?
I always thought that the taxi driver episode would be the one that gets explicit. Because, like, if we're going to do that, you do have to talk about things that are, like, kind of pretty uncomfortable. The thing is, in our very first episode, there was a scene where a guy kisses an underage girl. And we talked about, so we really have never avoided uncomfortable things since the beginning of our podcast.
We went strong.
We maybe have gotten better at, like, I've listened to the episode. We were, like, not really sure. I mean, I wasn't for sure not sure how to talk about that. Now I would have a little bit. I feel like I would. Sometimes it's better. I try to dance around things still, but sometimes it's better just to talk about them frankly, rather than dancing around.
Well, we've learned how to communicate bad news.
Yeah,
it's just. I think
it just depends. You know,
it is hilarious how strong out the gate we came with that.
Yeah,
first episode.
I don't think that was the intention. It just sort of happened.
You're like, yeah, neither of us had seen the film before, so we kind of just had to work with what we got.
It's so funny how like we were just like, let's do a movie podcast. It's not like, oh, let's pick a movie that we both know that we were both like comfortable with. It's like, no, Good Time, the Safdie brothers.
Mm-hmm. But the Safdie brothers are.
I had maybe seen like Uncut Gems before, and I was like, oh, we should watch.
Yeah, well, that's another. I mean, I know we're doing. Well, maybe there's some Adam Sandler in the future.
Yeah, maybe. Adam Sandler's every single Adam Sandler
Pixels, movie. Click. What's the one? Happy Gilmore? Is that Adam Sandler?
That's Adam Sandler. We watched that not for the podcast, but I think we watched it together.
Did we? Oh, that makes sense.
Either that or I watched it with Caleb and somebody else.
That is a Caleb film. Swiss Army Man is a Caleb film. Talladega Nights is a Caleb film. Hot Rod is a Caleb film. I think that was his favorite film because of that one scene where he falls down that hill for like 5 minutes. And
Hot Rod is a funny movie, but favorite movie?
Well, something, and then he loves when he just tries to beat up his stepdad or his dad. Like, something in Caleb's brain clicks.
Yeah.
And I can't scientifically explain
This is a unique thing about movies.
What's the unique thing about Caleb?
Well,
And
that too. Maybe more so that.
as my roommate of 2 years and close friend of many more, but yeah. So, any last thoughts on The Sting?
Well, we attacked it from all different angles, but nothing will take away from the fact that before there was Christopher Nolan, there was George Roy Hill. You don't have to go into physics and be like ultra pretentious to make a good puzzle and solution film.
My last
And I
thought
think that's
is
this.
that. Sorry, I thought you were done.
Oh, I'm done now.
My last thought is I retract my statement that Paul Newman is a new man in every movie. But I also don't. Because I thought about what you said. You said...
So you can be ambiguous about it.
He's always... Yes, I'm going to be ambiguous. Or just middle row. Or middle aisle.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah, I'm Molinizing this. And I think he is a new man in some ways where he has kind of played a supporting role now. And he's a very different actor. He's more serious. He's not as charismatic. But he's also the same anti-hero type, archetype. Soft anti-hero. Maybe we call it soft-core anti-hero. That's a new category, subcategory.
Softcore.
I've also
as opposed to
thought about,
hardcore anti-hero.
I've also thought about taking all, what is this, 118 or something?
Yeah.
All 100, we've probably done 125 films or so, and categorizing them and creating our own categories in Excel. I don't know. It seems like something that
I would love to do
your
that.
brain would really be
That would be interesting. But as we start getting more films, seeing more stats.
Well, we're
now
at a great rate right now.
Yeah, now we're starting to get a little bit more thoughtful about how we organize the order that we do films in. I think we started to be more to an extent. But I'm excited about our new series that we don't have a name for it yet. So
let's not announce it till the next
I've
episode.
sprinkled little hints and Easter eggs about it, but I'm really excited, and I'm excited about our guest that's coming on. He's going to be a really good guest.
I did forget about that. Yeah, he's an orator of all sorts.
Yeah. He's a much better public speaker and just speaker in general.
It's
than
almost
me.
like he's gifted in that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anywho, I guess I haven't closed the vault in like 8 episodes.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go for it.
I don't know. That's all I got. I'll just close it.
Doom, 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 doom.